Ginger Prime has made the video that I asked him to make.
Cool.
He actually made it. The video that I requested when I saw his video that he's leaving Final Fantasy.
Yep.
And he actually made it. That was fast.
I'm excited to see it.
Yeah. When I watched his I'm leaving goodbye video, I was like, damn, New World. That makes no fucking sense to me.
Perfect.
It would be great if he could make a video that explains why New World instead of Final Fantasy. Why would you do that? I do not get it.
It's perfect. That's literally what was asked for. So like when people say like, oh, it's like you're just chasing views. Well, you don't upload anything to the internet so that like people can't see it, because it would be better to just not record if that's your goal. So if people are saying we want to see something and you're like, cool, I want to make that thing. This is perfect. This is perfect. Way to go, Brian. Way to go. And like, I'm sure, I haven't seen it yet, but I assume somewhere in his comments or her comments or both, somebody will say it's clickbait. If it has 5 reasons why he believes World of Warcraft beats Final Fantasy, it is exactly what it is in the title and the thumbnail. I have not watched the video myself. I have been waiting because I wanted to watch it with Zepla. So we're doing it together with her from the past and me from now and Brian from even further in the past. It's like a conversation where they both didn't know I would be here. They didn't know I was going to be a part of it. I'm just joining in because YouTube is weird.
So here it is.
Okay. What does she put in her shake? So we drink shakes out of like the exact same container. Mine has chocolate, Huel, and banana is the primary shenanigans in here. What does she put in hers? It looks delicious.
This, and I want to know, what do they got that we don't got? Ginger Prime.
It could just be different. It doesn't have to be have, don't have.
I want to first say thank you so much for all the loving and wonderful comments on my Goodbye to Final Fantasy XIV video. It really was nice to sit down and read and have those discussions and get that input and get that insight from the wider Final Fantasy.
He was doing it for the kids? Yeah, he said he also has 5 kids. So that's all. That's really all the reasons.
He's got 5 kids and 5 reasons
he needs. I said that yesterday or a couple days ago. Like, seriously, he could have actually just made a video like, hey guys, I'm leaving Final Fantasy 14 because I have 5 kids. Goodbye. And like everyone would be like, we salute you. Okay, do whatever you need to do.
Fantasy 14 community. So thank you guys so much for being so loving and so, I guess, generous with your time. And hopefully you guys understand.
And I also have tried to, you know, cut the guy a lot of slack because of that. Like, just remember
my
that.
reasonings behind it. Now,
okay.
There's a couple other things that came up in that video. Number of things. One of the things a lot of people are reacting to that video specifically. I've been getting those sent to me, DM'd to me. I haven't seen any of them yet.
Okay.
My thought is that, you know what? I'm going to go hang out on Twitch tomorrow. Link will be in the description tomorrow night. And we'll work our way through the reactions. I can
Tonight, I believe. Tonight? Is that tonight?
Help answer any questions that
so
you guys
he's seen me
might
talk
have,
about
or we can
it.
discuss any points.
He has not watched Zepla as of this point. He will. But like, I think he got some direct feedback through DMs, and I said to him, like, I would love to see more specific reasons. So like, he's had little parts, but like, he has not heard any like analogy from a particular person that will be one of the team captains of him and I participating in New World next week. He hasn't seen anything from Zepla that is actually like overwhelmingly really positive and supportive. And I really thought hers was, if anything, very, very generous and very gracious and kind. He has not seen any of that.
That you guys feel needed a little bit more value. But the kind of other third idea.
So is he going to address the couple things that was weird? One of them was that...
So he tackled his reasons. Then he put a separate video out on his thoughts on Endwalker, which kind of explains some of his frustrations with the state of the game and why he feels like now is a good kind of break point and they need to pivot and show what's going to be different in the future, because otherwise, like, this is a really clean break. So there's 2 videos there. But the question that keeps coming up is A, what's the joke? And B, what's the deal with New World? Right? And it's coming from people like, I didn't really follow that game. I heard it was bad and I don't have anything to base that off of. So you're saying it's good. I'm going to need more than that.
FF14 players don't want to hear about possible improvements to the game. Or FF14 is made for WoW refugees. Like, that was those things were weird to me. And what is it about New World that's so good? These are the questions
it came down to why New World? Why is New World so good? What is it doing that Final Fantasy XIV isn't doing? And so I thought I would take today, and actually this video, to kind of break that down and kind of the 5 reasons why I feel New World is giving me what I want and what I need in an MMO, where Final Fantasy XIV has been falling short, and they've been falling short for a long time. This isn't to say that you're wrong for liking Final Fantasy. I'd still highly encourage anybody who wants to check out Final Fantasy to check out the game.
Wait a minute. Meanwhile, there's Zepplet. 24/7 FFXIV and Zeplet's kids. Haven't seen her in 3... Wait, I have kids? Holy shit. You guys are basically my kids. Like, the buns...
Final Fantasy XIV with Endwalker feels...
This is the quality time we're spending together as a bun
like
fam.
A complete journey for me. And will they invite me back into another round? Time will tell. And that's what that video is about. But to dive into more specifically what New World is doing, I thought this video would actually make the most sense. So, guys, if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, comments, always here for you.
What
you can
is it
below,
that's
or
good?
hang out on Discord, or see you hopefully tomorrow
Please
over
tell
on
me.
Twitch for the live reactions to all of that crazy chaos that apparently kicked off this week. So, anyways, let's dive in.
Let's dive in, yes.
I think it's incredibly important to preface every bit of feedback that I give in an MMO to what I feel an MMO is. And that comes from Final Fantasy XI. Final Fantasy XI was my entry point. It defined a good chunk of my life prior to Final Fantasy XIV. And even the irony or the humor in all of it is that New World really delivers on what Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 missed the mark on. Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 actually has a lot of what I'm going to share with you today, but it really did.
So I didn't play FF11, and there's only one thing that I know about FF11. What I know about FF11 is that it had a boss that caused vomiting and took 18 hours to beat. I know that FF11 had a boss in which people were passing out and getting physically ill. We decided to end it before we risked turning into a horrible news story about how video games ruin people's lives. He also mentioned several members of the Link Shell vomited over the course of the battle. So when people say that FF11 was hardcore, believe them, okay? Like, I have so much different respect now for FF11 players. I feel like they're on a level that I would never ever reach.
Didn't capitalize on it, and for good.
She says didn't, past tense. For anybody that is curious about that, there are private servers. That's a whole other can of worms, but they do exist just as a statement of fact. But B, like, there are actually ways to subscribe and still be in 11. The reason the private servers exist is there was some development decisions as they continue to support the game that took it into like a different direction. And some people want to go back to before that moment, like people that wanted WoW Classic, and it had private servers prior to Blizzard deciding that they wanted to be the ones in charge of that. And then there was a gap where they shut them down but hadn't yet launched. So, like, if it is something that anything he says here or anything she says here makes you say something about that interests me, or I'd love to have a little context and try that myself, that is available.
Good reason. And when I follow the development, when I've been following the game since Project Rapture, it ends up being a lot of time invested
gamers.
and The thing a lot of people end up missing is what was going on during the time, especially in Japanese game development, and there was a lot of fears about people dying and losing their lives in these online games. And so Final Fantasy XIV kind of...
And it looks kind of like the Arbiter.
Development cycle grew up among these restrictions and fears that were being, you know, capitalized by news media at the time. So it's really interesting to see how that played out, because I wish Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 kept a lot of what I'm going to share with you, and maybe one day it will. But
so what kind of worries and fears influenced the development of 1.0 coming off the heels of FF11? Like,
the No Clip documentary is likely the aside that if you just want to take a pause from this video and go dive into a 3-part documentary from No Clip, that's likely the answer to this question.
Because from what I understand, 1.0 is also pretty hardcore.
That's perfectly fine. It is. You know, there's nothing, I as a software engineer myself, I fully get that what I have always stated in terms of feedback is a big ask, even if it sounds simple. And that's usually where a lot of friction in development and feedback come into play, where it's the assumption that things are simple when reality-wise they're going to take a long time to implement, and they might not be with the direction and the values of that. But the first things first, so you guys understand. You've heard me argue this many times if you've been following the content for any point in time, but just to rehash it all here.
They legit think New World pays this guy. They don't. They don't. He and I are participating in the event next week. There are people participating in the event next week that are paid. We are not being paid.
A player-driven economy. A player-driven economy is essential to what makes an MMORPG an MMORPG. You don't have to...
And software engineer, comedian, YouTuber, father, 5. Not in that order. So software engineer is what provides for he and his family. His wife does not work. She stays home because by the time you have 5 kids, having somebody that can help get them to school, having somebody that pick them up from school, having somebody that can take care of them kind of full-time actually becomes incredibly cost prohibitive. Like if she wants to then say, oh, I want to go out in the workplace, and so without kind of talking too much about her and her private life, she doesn't choose to share as much of this. So anything Brian wants to share, that's between them. It's not my place. But like obviously you can see how it would be very hard for her to find an industry where she could go out there. And that's not to say like that's a female position. If she was the one being the primary breadwinner, I can just tell you that if my wife and I had 5 kids, based on what my wife's career choices are and what my career choices are, at this stage in time, we would have me staying home. So like it just doesn't make any sense to have like I don't make enough doing this to outpace the cost of a nanny and 5 kids in childcare and like all these things, in addition to, you know, Brian and his wife have goals for them and what they expect them to experience throughout school, extracurricularly and academically. And those things, many of their goals for their kids aren't free. And so it's going to take a fair bit of resources. So he is a software engineer by trade. Comedian is a hobby. That's just something he does. He does shows when he can. And he doesn't do shows when he can't, and there's no static or anything like in Final Fantasy. He doesn't have like a regular gig that he's like at every time of the week. So I think comedian as a career choice, if that was how he made his money, that would be very, very hard to then say, I can't play Final Fantasy and spend time with my kids, but I can go out and be out on the road and traveling every night. So I think, you know, hey, having a chance to book one gig one time in South Texas and drive down there would be a really neat experience. But it's a hobby. It's a hobby. And he's having success at it, and he's having a blast, and that's great. And hobbies are wonderful. Everybody should have something they get to be a nerd about that is not tied to their income. It's really, really healthy. You get to experiment with it. You get to take breaks whenever you want. I don't care what that thing is. I think everybody should have one. Maybe it's a TV show. Maybe it's playing an instrument. Maybe it's video games. Maybe it's working out. Whatever it is, I think everybody should have something that they're passionate about.
I agree, but that is my definition. That's something that I always look for. Why is that? What does that do for us as players? It removes some of this mindless restriction between, or friction between, the casual and the hardcore player. The casual player benefits the hardcore player because they're out gathering and crafting and providing services and goods, where the hardcore player could take advantage of it. In the modern MMO, especially with the subscription, the casual player makes up 99%, I'm making up a number, of the revenue that these games take to run, so that the hardcore player can have some hardcore content. And what I've seen happen over the course, especially the last 10 years, more friction between the two, where in a player-driven economy, economics really solves a lot of player friction because it
So how is the player economy in New World different from the player economy in a game like...
Oh God, hold on to that. Player economy. If he does not talk about that as a reason that he particularly likes New World over Final Fantasy, and it's just something that he notes is different, let's come back to that.
Final Fantasy 14. Like, obviously having a player-driven economy is fantastic, and it's needed in the MMO, but doesn't FF14 have that?
No.
He said that, like,
no.
Oh, maybe
Final Fantasy 14 has one of the worst but still functional market board designs in MMORPGs for games that are made in 2022. It was designed based on some ideas and some plans and some thoughts on how things were built back when it was built. There is a reason World of Warcraft has changed so much. They did not change it until it was literally crippling their servers. They waited as late as possible, which is why the rollout felt so rushed, and the initial rollout was such a poor experience, but they had to get to the other side. It was literally holding their servers back. No, like, simply put, Final Fantasy, due to simplicity in the gearing system, due to limitations in the glamour system, due to limitations in the housing system, due to ease of access to everybody being a gatherer crafter, being able to make everything, due to the simplicity in macroing there are a lot of reasons that there's not a whole lot of reasons that things are hitting the market board that we consume on an everyday basis. Outside of things like raid consumables, which is what he's talking about, that kind of top end people consuming 600 potions, and then where do those come from? Especially when we all spend all of our astronomy on relics. I bet mistletoe is really expensive right now. And so who provides for that? And then how does it provide? And then what does that transaction look like? And so when you compare it to something like a Guild Wars 2, which I know she's played, with a buy order and a sell order, and when you start to just have more movement, more turning and burning, more of the act of bringing things in and pressing things out. So we'll see.
Casual players are out collecting and grinding and gathering shit that for the hardcore players to use. But I'm thinking, like, in a raiding environment, if you're a hardcore raiding environment, you usually do have designated people on the team that are out there doing the crafting and gathering to gather and collect everything that's required for potions and food for the team. Usually there is somebody or multiple people on the team that are responsible for that and tend to be pretty hardcore about that. So I struggle to see the difference there. So the economy in New World is different because there are countless duping exploits.
No. Duping exploits are all fixed.
Destroy the economy. Look, I'm not trying to just sit here and dunk on New World.
No.
I'm genuinely, I'm trying to watch this with an open mind and
they're just functionally different.
Hear what he's getting from the game that Final Fantasy 4 doesn't have. FF14 doesn't have. In New World, the economy blows up every 4 months because another game-breaking bug is found and exploited. Okay. Multiple updates caused item duplication in New World and destroyed the economy multiple times.
Nope.
Okay. So
it has more to do with the consumption. It's closer to something like an EVE Online where things are being consumed. One of the hard things about Final Fantasy XIV is that nothing ever gets consumed. And what I mean by that is, imagine that you leveled a class to 15 or 30 back for cross-class skills, and then you equipped it with gear, and then you never used it again. And you had some food that was somehow relevant for that level, because some MMOs do stuff like that, and you needed it, and you stored that in your inventory. And so it was, chicken and rice or some crap like that. And you take a year off of that character. That gear does not diminish in any way. That food does not diminish in any way. You take that character out and die 20 million times. You walk to a single repair vendor, you repair it. It is full durability. It's done. It's done. It never is consumed ever. And so one of the problems with that is things like materia, for example. Final Fantasy XIV generates enormous amounts of materia. Everything generates materia. These little green dots down here in her inventory, right here, when those turn white, you can extract materia. Meanwhile, dungeons feeding you materia. Meanwhile, hunts feeding you materia. Everything is feeding you materia, 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 and yet outside of pentamelding, we have very little use for materia, and so we basically go through huge amounts of materia every time we go through a big pentameld push, and the rest of the time, the total amount of materia on the market is going up faster than it's being consumed, which causes the price to plummet. And that's just supply demand. Because of the way the market board works, it does not allow for the price to ever kind of self-correct when somebody artificially lists low. So it causes some really weird things with how things are valued versus a more traditional commodity market, because it functions more like an eBay market where every listing is treated as unique. And so you have 27 listings of one materia, and they're all at different prices, but any one of them, they're all the same item ID. They're all identical in every way. And so if I want to buy 5, that's 5 separate transactions, and yet those people are all competing to try to be the one that gets bought first. And so it causes some weird stuff with the price. You can argue like, oh, well, that's really good for the buyer, except that then that buyer turns around and is a seller in some other way. So it causes a lot of weird stuff that just basically puts a constant downward pressure on the prices in the game. Not to mention it's a vertical progression game. So typically items over the course of many expansions become easier to acquire. Typically, broad speaking, items become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And New World is too new for us to know if that's going to be the case. We just literally don't know. And so that point of comparison doesn't quite add up, but to be aware of a weakness within Final Fantasy XIV system that does exist, that he may be hoping or believing that New World is showing it may not have, is that typically we have this long-term downward pressure where things just get easier and easier and easier to acquire, or less and less and less useful. There's a huge number of items that crafters can make that have no value anymore. There's a huge number of fish that you can catch that have no value basically ever. And so there's this constant downward pressure on the market. There are things that literally just bottom out. Meanwhile, you're limiting the number of listings that each individual player can put up. And so there isn't this ability to say, okay, well, I'll operate large scale within a market that there's low margin. That doesn't really work in the same way that happens in like World of Warcraft with the Goblin community. And I'm not saying these things are bad. Maybe this is their goal. Maybe they want constant downward pressure. Maybe they don't want a goblin economy. Maybe they don't want these things. And that's fine. But when you're saying they are different, they are different. A lot of what Brian argues when he and I collaborate and he talks about this player economy, a lot of what he wants for a player economy, I don't want in Final Fantasy XIV. He wants that to go as far as extreme things like why not be able to buy and sell ultimate weapons? I don't want that. So I'm not saying these things are bad, but they are intentional design choices within Final Fantasy XIV that cause it to not function the way a economy simulator commodity board would. And that's more of what the general market has moved to. That's what New World has moved to. That's what Guild Wars has moved to. That's what World of Warcraft has moved to. And some of those games, the word moved to isn't right. They launched with that, or they've always kind of been that way. But that is where everything is headed, as opposed to this like, oh, it's an individual Craigslist listing, which within Final Fantasy, considering every item ID is a fixed thing, we don't have stat variety, and you can argue high quality, but that's really just two different items. With the same cosmetic. And it's like, oh, this one just has slightly higher stats and a very, very similar freaking name. So they're adjacent item IDs. And then that's it. There's no real variety. And so when you look at changes like what WoW's doing with region-wide commodity trading, though they're not very clear on defining what the word commodity means to them, it's just different. It's just different. So when he says that he wants the economy to work different in 14 really does act like a bit of an island compared to the other games that are more of what Brian describes.
Okay.
It ends up giving value to every action. Not the same value, but every action has a value to a casual player and to a hardcore player. The reference or the hardcore player value to a casual is something to aspire to. It always gives you something to chase, and the value that the casual player brings to the hardcore is not just in finances for the game, but it's also in in-game economy and items, keeping things at a relatively fixed or low cost ultimately. Now, bots obviously play an issue. Now, is a player-driven economy the perfect solution? No. That's always going to be something that struggles in the long term and the short term if the developers don't manage that. And so it is a resource intensive thing to do in terms of its design and its function. So it's not.
You said, from what you read, the economy breaking bugs are still in the game since launch.
No, they're not.
So this is a point that he's making that I feel like I fundamentally do not understand. How does FF14 not have the player-driven economy that he's seeking, setting aside botters and RMT that's probably going to be present in any game? Tags had also mentioned something that he mentioned earlier. There are no fears with 1.0. They thought it was going to be amazing like FF11 without looking into the game industry at all or playing other games.
If you don't care for particular glamours, or if you are happy with the glamours and mount skins that you have in Final Fantasy XIV, and you are not a savage raider, so you don't need consumables, you don't need pentameld week 1, and you have been around the game a long time, so you've slowly acquired the glamours you do want, you've slowly acquired the orchestrants you do want, you've slowly acquired maybe a house, you've decorated it once or twice, Gil very, very rapidly drops off. What Brian is looking for is something that creates constant and incessant movement within Gil. He is looking for something that creates a need where every time you log in, you wish you had more money. In Guild Wars, I never, ever, ever feel too broke to play, but I always feel that if I had 10, 100, 1,000 more gold than I do, that would be better. And in Final Fantasy, I don't give a crap unless I set an artificial goal for myself. If I have 10 million gil more than I do right now, I literally just don't care. I don't care. And so I have to set goals for myself. So we've done big giveaways on stream. I've given away over 30 million gil this year. I've got a goal next year. So I don't have a reason for money. And so what he's looking for is a constant reason for money. And one of the things, as I pick up New World and play it more than casually next year, and I move it into being an active MMO in my rotation with 14, then Guild Wars, then WoW, it will sit in the 4th spot. So it's not going to get an immense amount of playtime, but it'll sit in the 4th spot. Is I want to go chase gold and see what Brian is seeing. Is he feeling that he needs gold because he's limited on his playtime because of the other priorities he's named? And so it keeps it really hungry for him, and he's just got too much time in 14 to realize it's the same? Or is it truly different? Because at a glance, I think it's something closer to the World of Warcraft and Guild Wars systems. And that means that, like, I probably want gold. Now, what I will say is one of the reasons those two games have a constant need for gold, one of the reasons EVE Online has a constant need for gold, is because of things like the Plex token gem buying systems. Those cause an entirely new set of problems. And so that, like, once again, I am not saying we should hope for these things in 14. They might say, hey, we have a set of problems in here linked to this decision, and if we change this decision, we're going to get this other set of problems, and we really don't want those. It might be intentional, but that doesn't mean they're not there.
Only kicked in once they realized the game was not coming together and were not given more time to fix it. Yeah, it does seem like that they weren't worried about much whenever they made it. Maybe they should have been worried about it a bit more when they were looking at the game they were about to put onto the market. FF14 literally has that. Crafters and gatherers are important when a raid tier drops. Yeah, that's
every 8
what
months.
I thought. That's why I don't understand where the comparison is. Yeah, Twas, you said, I also don't
an easy solution, but I really love that New World has a player-driven economy because it makes your own quests. Like, man, you tell me that it would be so cool to say, right-click achievement lock, right-click this, and turn that into a quest in either of these games. I think that would be amazing. And same concept that goes into it. Like when we use garlic as an example, garlic likes to fluctuate in price in New World. It's a valuable resource used in a lot of different things. And sometimes the price gets really high on garlic. What does that end up doing? It makes people go out and actually gather garlic. You might not.
But oh, there's ads. Thanks for letting me know. I'll pause it here. Okay, I will wait a sec for the ads. We'll wait a sec for the ads. But Pizzazz Frost, thanks for subbing. doesn't that happen in every game? Yeah, like I think almost everybody.
It does. It's just not the same. In 14, the act of listing and managing prices on a retainer is clumsy. It is not fun to go farm up 15 materials and keep them listed on there. But in games with a cleaner market board UI, that can be fun. That can be easy. World of Warcraft's base UI is 1,000 times better than the market board, and then I can overlay add-ons on top of that. Guild Wars is 1,000 times better, and I can sell it from anywhere. And so then it takes the clumsy part and it gets that out of the way. And so then I can just make decisions to go farm. I can just make decisions to go farm. And when I go farm, I can farm a lot of anything, and everything has value. And there are things in 14 that will sit on a market board for sometimes months. I have found items that have been listed where in the history of the recent 20 transactions, I can see multiple years. Multiple years. That's crazy. Why put that item in the game if you're just going to let it die like that? And so, like, Final Fantasy is just not good at making Gil something that we can chase the same way we chase item level, where you use item level to kill harder things, to drop higher item level, and you go around and around and around, and there's some other systems kind of jump starting, and it feeds into a loop. But once you have Gil, I don't really find this desire to like take that Gil and like push it into more Gil and push it into more Gil and push it into more Gil. And there are ways to do that. Ash 10 does a brilliant job of it. But when you look at people like Ash 10 and I watch him play, his gameplay doesn't look as fun as when I go watch gold makers in other games, because the systems in the game, he's forced Final Fantasy into being something that he can do this way. It wasn't designed to say we're fostering this, as opposed to games with loot systems and market board systems and currency systems that allow those things to interact in more of a constant, free-moving, free flow. Once again, I'm not saying that's a reason 14 should be worse than or different than New World, but I will agree that it is a reason that this Ginger Prime guy is pointing out that they are different.
Has had this experience where you look on the market board, something's really expensive. So you have to ask yourself, do I want to go gather this or not? Do I want to spend the time to go gather that, or do I want to buy it right now because I'm lazy? Or in Final Fantasy XIV, you actually have more options because you can go to any server and buy shit on their market board, which is going to have different prices than your main server's market board. In fact, you can go to a different data center now and check the other data center servers' market boards and try to find a better price that way.
Have you done that? Like, that is wildly not fun gameplay.
From other players, if you really cannot be arsed to gather it yourself. So again, like, as you said, the difference is New World has a player-driven economy, whereas FFXIV has an economy that's player-driven.
They're different. They're different. So I don't know if he had said it differently, if she would feel differently, but they are just different.
Yeah. It does seem like that. It does. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's like the players, it's the players that are driving the economy. Okay. Josh Drive Hayes has a few videos explaining the utter busted state of New World's economy. I feel this is him being burned out on FF in the community. New World may just be a case of the grass being greener. I mean, if that's the case, that's okay to feel that way, but I would just like to hear why. I think it's worth hearing it out. That's like, what is it that's appealing, that's different? What's appealing that's different? How can we compare the things, right? I almost feel like it would be better to just talk to Ginger, like literally just call him and ask him so that we could sort it out. Like, I mean, not sort it out, but like, you know, ask him directly that way.
The guy loves podcasting. Casey Neistat talked about in a post about Kanye that he was pretty upset talks about how like some people come to different forms of content creation, or he compares it to like music and anything with different backgrounds, and he really like holds up on this kind of pedestal this elite pure moment when you have somebody that's truly for an artist. And I will tell you, the reason this guy is in content creation is to podcast. He just wants to talk about the things that he likes and do it in a way that has other people talk about the things that they like. And they're like, well, he's not getting to his point very analytically. Not the goal. Well, he's not persuading me to buy merch. I don't want to spend money. Not the goal. Well, I just think that he just plays trailers and just talks. Yeah, because the second part, that's the goal. He just wants to talk about video games. Work to game started because I was in an outside sales job driving on the road, and I would call him and we would talk about video games for like 2 or 3 hours a day. And then we would come home and we were so excited about it. We wanted to talk about it with other people, but I was broke and living in Washington, D.C., and he was living here and was, and he wanted people to talk about, and we would talk to our wives and they would be like, hey, like, I think it's really cool that you have a hobby, but this can't be the only thing you talk to me about. So that we can talk about other things, can you get some of that out of your system somewhere else? And so we started a channel just about talking. That's what we did. Controller guides and stuff, that all came later and was just something that became like a really fun service to the community. And we've learned a lot, and we've tried a lot of different things. And ultimately, like, Work to Game has worked its way back to just being a conversation.
So like if there's something that I don't understand, then I could just like
call him.
straight up
Call
ask.
him.
Because
line it up.
Because I want to know. Like I really have an open mind, and I want to know because I'm interested. It's fascinating to me. Just like I'm fascinated by MMOs, and I'm interested in the differences between the major MMOs, and I want to understand those differences better. Really. I don't really like, I don't care if he doesn't like FF14 anymore, but I'm just neat. It's a neat topic to me.
Want to go gather garlic, and that's perfectly fine, but a lot of people find a lot of value. And being that you can use gold, and being that gold is a power in New World, it allows you to participate in any number of things, gearing up and progression, for example. So sometimes if you just have a little bit of time, you might want to go gather some garlic, make a lot of money off of doing so, and then maybe getting that sword or that shield or that piece of gear that you've been wanting. And
this is well above Penta. He is talking about, from a 14 standpoint, he believes that if people are getting extra Savage drops, you should be able to buy Bis. So if you believe that, you can see how there would be an immediate frustration with Final Fantasy XIV, right? And so the reasons that Ginger Prime believes that New World beats Final Fantasy, you can see that difference, right? You can see that difference. And so saying New World lets me buy the equivalent of Bis and Final Fantasy doesn't let me buy Bis or Ultimate Weapons, that is an objective difference. And then her chat can freaking toss all the kappas in there and go, but that's bad, that's bad. Ginger Prime, on Ginger Prime's channel, said, here is a reason why Ginger Prime believes that New World beats Final Fantasy, which this part is an opinion thing. So what this really means is that a person on their own channel said, I think there are different things between these games, and then up here did different things. They are different things. And so, like, it's not clickbait, it's not a lie, it's not trolling for views, it's not hate baiting and all this crap. It is two different things between these games. I fundamentally disagree that that is a good long-term system on its own, isolated from the rest of a game. I don't want games to have more of that. He does. So you can see how when I say this year, I'm looking for a very similar set of base ideas from video games as Brian, and I decided that I want more 14 in my life, and he decided he wants more New World in his life. You can see how we came to different solutions to the same problems when we have fundamental disagreements on which of these differences beats the other one.
Haven't had time to invest in running expeditions over and over again. So a player-driven economy opens up the game to multiple different
But
avenues.
again, you can
it
do
adds
that.
value
Nope.
to any
Nope.
action that you take, and that action and that value is going to scale one way or the other. But again, it's a player-driven choice that gives you that value. So you can choose to opt
Like
in,
in
you can choose to
FFXIV.
completely opt out. The choice is yours. And that ties into number 2, player choice, player builds, being able to really define your character. This is one of the things that is obviously...
So like player-driven economy.
If she's just gonna say that Final Fantasy has the same feature list as New World, then she should play New World. Or she should play WoW. Like, she should play those games more. She's talked about maybe an interest in Dragonflight, maybe, try and evoke her. Because feature list, MMORPGs in general, if you just write down, like, 2-word descriptions of whole systems, like, they both have dungeons, and now they both have hard mode dungeons. Is Mythic Plus identical to Criterion? I mean, they both exist. Ginger Prime would love New World, so Mutagen dungeons at the same time. She's been trying Guild Wars 2. Fractals, they're the same thing. They're the same thing. They're the same thing.
Stuff is expensive, then you might need to go gather it. Buying stuff from the market board saves time, especially if you're a raider. Casuals can go do that and gather it, and then you can buy it from them. We got all that. We do got all that.
Missing from Final Fantasy.
Okay,
so you can choose to opt in, you can choose to completely opt out. It adds value to any action that you take.
He wants to buy bits.
And that action and that
Like,
value.
also gold is, like, the player currency has value.
No,
gold is valuable. Gil is
Is
valuable.
going to
Yeah.
scale one way or the other. But again, it's a player-driven choice that gives you that value.
She has 90 million gil on her character right now. What is she using that for? What in Final Fantasy XIV can you even spend 90 million gil on? Where does that go? What stops that number from just going up arbitrarily? Like, gil does not matter. Gil matters to new players. You can buy a house? No, you can't. I dare you. Go buy a lottery ticket. You know what you'll have next week? The same number.
It's not unique. He's just burnt out after his Omni 90. Some people were dicks to him too. Yeah, a lot of people are being like needlessly rude to the guy, I feel.
You can choose to opt in, you can choose to completely opt out. The choice is yours. And that ties into number 2, player choice, player builds, being able to really define your character. This is one of the things that is obviously missing from Final Fantasy XIV 1.0. Yeah. And we've seen it become more curated and streamlined due to balance.
That's valid.
I understand why.
Yeah, I mean, that is valid. But in New World, can you play, like...
Oh, she has a house. Well, then she can't get another one.
Class on one character? Because the thing with FF14, no, you don't have builds. No, you don't have talent trees. But your job will work right out the box. And if you don't like it, you can just play a completely different job with a different weapon.
Yeah, so the New World system. I don't have New World open, and it runs like garbage, and they don't have control of their volume when I am also streaming and doing other things, as opposed to, I mean, Guild Wars does kind of too. Final Fantasy and WoW both do a great job of running on like a microwave, so I can run them in the background while I do this. New World weapons. Let me just pull up an image here. Hopefully it gets better. All right, so New World, best starter weapons. Let's just go. Okay, so here's their image for whoever this is. Thank you for using a thumbnail with the thing in it. Here we go. Oh, here we go. Oh, nice, nice. Open image in new tab. Oh, that's a beautiful thing. All right, so this is their weapon system. Basically, each one is a little bit different, and you can equip them and you level them up. You level your progression kind of like you would a job inside Final Fantasy XIV. And so FFXIV jobs, and we go to images. Final Fantasy XIV has jobs. Open image in new tab. Thank you so much. Oh, you guys are wonderful. Each of these job stones has their own unique weapon. And so warriors have axes, dark knights have great swords, gunbreakers have gun blades, and so on. And so in New World, instead of having defined classes, you just have weapons that you equip. And those weapons have small sub-tech trees. And so you get to make various choices. New World weapon tech tree. You can do it. Images. Ah, there we go. Okay, here we go. That's perfect. Thank you to people that have images on the internet. All right, and so as you level things up, you have different options, and you have a couple of different trees, so they could add these different trees. These would be like having Summoner and Scholar underneath the same one. And you choose these various choices, and some of these are passives, some of these are actives. You have a very limited number of actives on your bar, so it feels kind of like Guild Wars, where at first glance you don't have enough buttons, but as you get better at the game, you slowly realize, oh god, there is still complexity underneath not enough buttons. I haven't played enough of it to be able to really put it to that, but like Guild Wars, for example, there's basically like 5 buttons on the left, 5 buttons on the right, a Final Fantasy equivalent of like a limit break type button, a personal limit break, and a dodge roll. And so you have about 12 buttons, give or take, outside of movement. And yet my rotation is like 28 buttons long. And so like the complexity is there. And so I'm looking forward to getting to know New World better over the next year. Hopefully Brian does a better job explaining this here in a second. But what she's saying here is like there is build variety in this. There absolutely is, with how you pair these and how you do different builds. And then your armor, you choose different weights of armor, and that determines like how your dodge roll works. And there's like light, medium, and heavy, and so it gives you a little bit of so it's kind of like we had cross-class skills back. Like it's not the flex of something like Diablo or Path of Exiles or even Guild Wars, where like debatably in Guild Wars is so flexible in their builds. You can build bad builds. You can absolutely build builds that are just objectively bad at the game. And you can get there by accidentally making the mistake of clicking things that sound really cool. So like maybe this is called like Barbaric Leap or something like that. And maybe the shield is called like Unlimited Armor. And you're like, I have Barbaric Leap, and then those are great. And then because of the way synergies and stuff work in Guild Wars, somebody runs a DPS meter on you, and it's like, hey, you're doing a 500 DPS, and if you auto-attacked, you'd do 2,000, and the optimal build is doing 36 bajillion. And so, like, it lets you get into your own trouble.
So there are no classes in New World. The builds are very basic. Can I use a bow and then also use a staff? Like, what's the weapon?
Yeah, it's a weapon swap like Guild Wars. You have a primary and a secondary.
How are the weapons tied into the classes? There's only one race can play all classes by switching weapons.
Yep.
So you just put on a different weapon, and then you can I change the weapon in combat? You can play any weapon type 2 at a time. Okay. Okay.
I get it as a game designer, and I get it as a player, why these choices were made, but it's really such a beautiful thing that in New World.
So there's no weapons themselves have abilities. It's true that FFXIV doesn't have build diversity in the same way that WoW does, really, with skill trees.
Doesn't have build diversity at all. If you go pull the rotations of the top 100 paladins, they are all geared the exact same way, and they are all doing the exact same abilities, to the point where people in these fights can tell you when they missed a singular global cooldown, because there is, and it's not, oh, I made a choice. No, it is literally perfect. There is 0. So just to make it clear, not to pad it, not to sugarcoat it, there is not, well, there's less. There's not less. If we had a spectrum of every game ever made, and build diversity over here was a card game, and you just literally did whatever you want, and there didn't even have to be a functional thing in a video game, and somehow that's in this category. That's all the way over here. And you said, what's a game with no build variety? Do we need to make something up, like a card game on that end? Because that sounds like that wouldn't exist. That's Final Fantasy XIV. There is literally no build variety. You are what you are. There is no, I just decided to use less Fel Cleaves during my inner release. Then you did it wrong.
That's a trade-off with the class system. I prefer the class system, being every class with one character. Well, we're not really comparing WoW right now. We're looking at FFXIV versus New Worlds. So I agree with you, Stargazer. It looks like you can use any weapon. On New World.
Any weapon.
Okay.
You can step in, you can pick whatever weapons suit you, you can have your own crazy build, you can pick your stats, you can focus in on your perks. You, in a way, can define what is best in slot for you and best.
So,
No. I disagree with him there, because ultimately, the moment you get into something where you are deciding who can clear the deepest, hardest content, and if everybody can do it, who can do it the fastest or cleanest, or the moment you get into a PvP situation, there will be things that rise above anybody else always. And that will be established as the meta, because not everybody wants to be a sweaty gamer, but nobody wants to suck.
Goes online, I could make my own build, but it ended up being really scuffed at endgame.
Sure.
Because I created my own build just from whatever I wanted, and I liked it, and it was working.
I've been told as a non-paladin player that paladin was a poor choice for the example I tried to make.
For me while I was leveling, but when I got to endgame, people wanted a cookie cutter build. Is it similar situation in New World, where people are at the end of the day going to start expecting a certain type of build from you? New World will have
Work to Game was on stream this morning talking about Final Fantasy XIV. Hello! Hi! My name's Chris. I am part of Work to Game. I share it with my friend Brian. He runs a channel called Ginger Prime. I sometimes upload to a channel called Gaming Kinda, but I spend most of my time on Work to Game. Brian and I love talking about video games, and he has been playing Final Fantasy with me for a very long time. He's the reason I got in just after the launch of A Realm Reborn. He tried to get me into 1.0, but every time I had follow-up questions like, how good is it? Should I really leave WoW for this? His responses alarmed me. So 2.0 launched. He said it was going to be better. I said, sure, your last game failed, so how about you give it a little bit? But eventually I did join him there early on in A Realm Reborn, and I've been here ever since. And I run it with him, and so that means I want to continue talking with my friend about Final Fantasy XIV. My friend that understands Final Fantasy XIV. My friend that I have shared Final Fantasy XIV with for a long, long time. The guy that sat next to me on the couch when we interviewed Yoshi P. The guy that I stayed in a hotel room with in adjacent beds. Don't make it weird. At FanFest. People thought we were partners for a long time because we said we were YouTube partners, but actually we're just two guys whose wives appreciate that we get to nerd out together. He's an enormous part of my life. He's a longtime friend. He's the older brother of my college roommate. And if I want to talk about Final Fantasy XIV with him on our collaborative YouTube channel, which we film collaborations while I am live on Twitch, I stream 5 days a week, then I can promise some of our posts are going to be about Final Fantasy XIV, even if he quit. He said he's willing to stop making posts about Final Fantasy XIV if it pisses people off. I think that's very, very kind of him. He is the very kind, warm, and emotional one of the two of us, in my opinion. I have been told that I am the condescending tool. So I can tell you that if we get negative comments saying Brian shouldn't be allowed to talk about Final Fantasy XIV with Chris, and a subject comes up that I, Chris, say I'd love to talk about this with my friend Brian, I'm going to ask him to film it with me. If he doesn't choose to film it, that's for you. That's for you. Because I want to keep talking about Final Fantasy with my friend.
Will always be meta builds. Because people were like, oh, what's that build you have? And I'm like, oh, well, I'm a tank mage. I'm a lightning atronach. That's my aesthetic. And they're like, what the fuck is that? If you're a mage, you should have a pet out. You should have your familiars out. You have your pets going, and you should have a staff. You have a destruction staff and play a mage. That's what we need. And I'm like, well, I don't want to do that. And they're like, well, maybe your thing is good, but we don't have time to check it right now. Like, we're about to go into the dungeon, and it's completely reasonable. Like, it's reasonable that at endgame players would expect, like, have these expectations so that we don't have to sit around vetting your weird build to see if it's going to be good enough or not. Like, no one has time to do all that. You have stats point, which...
Yeah, she's absolutely head on right there. So one of the problems that I see with build variety that shows in New World versus Final Fantasy XIV, she kind of tried to keep her chat from comparing other games, so I'll try to stay out of other games. You know, I'm eavesdropping on their conversation here. And so when I watched Brian stream New World last time that he got into their kind of like crazy dungeons, they didn't get a clear. And that is because they didn't have the gear level, or they didn't have the build variety, or they didn't have the mechanical skill. They didn't, but I first of all, I didn't find them blaming each other. I didn't find them getting angry. I didn't find them getting frustrated. And so there is something about either A, that's just unique to that community thing. Maybe there's people that like to fail together in Mythic Plus or something like that, if we're willing to bring other games into this. But I can just tell you, as we looked at systems like Criterion and all of that, the fact that there is no reward for, like, for dungeons, there's no real reward for like partial clears. There's a little bit of a loot drop, but ultimately, like, you want clears. You want clears of Savage. You want to eventually clear the tier of Savage. You want to clear all of Criterion. You want to clear whole runs of Variant. There's something about what they were doing that seemed fun for them. So I look forward to getting into the game to understand what that is, because she's absolutely right. If your goal is a clear, I don't even want to get started if we're going to spend 90 minutes failing because you chose a build that just can't do it.
Buff you certain weapon, buff your weapons types, okay? There are still BIS abilities and builds that are just better at the game because, for instance, they are two-handed greatsword. So just play the optimized build. That's always the paradox, isn't it? With giving players the ability to choose their build and do, like, build their own BIS, like he just mentioned. That build your own BIS kind of doesn't... That, I don't know. Like, can you do that? Can you really and truly just pick whatever you think is going to be BIS? Because BIS, to me, is usually a set, like a very specific set that is the best for a weapon type. It don't work. I had to change.
But even within Guild Wars, like, there's a couple builds within even the same class and like within the same Final Fantasy XIV Jobstone. So to bring another game, I'm trying not to, but to bring another game into this as an example that she would maybe make examples of, because she has been messing with it. Touche on clearing the Halloween Tower. I just got eaten up by the green goo over and over. There are sometimes multiple builds, and what it allows for the developers to do is, as they change patches and stuff, it allows people to experiment and try different builds. Maybe pull an old build out of the trash because it comes back into favor. Maybe try all new things, and take the top builds, those meta builds that everybody feels like they have to play whether they like it or not, and it can kind of bring those down a peg. As opposed to Final Fantasy, where what happens is when a job ends up worse, you know, in a fairly recent history, it gets left out of a lot of runs of the current content altogether, because it's not like, oh, well, Warriors and Paladins just needed to change their rotation to keep up with Gunbreakers or Dark Knights, or they just needed to change their gearing, or they just needed to select a different set of attributes. Do you guys remember when we used to be able to choose attributes? Or they need to slot main stat. Remember when we could slot main stat? Or they need to bring different cross-class skills. Remember when we could bring cross-class skills? Like, and so like, it's like, no, like, I have the biz gear and I have the rotation is the same. I just can't do it. And so the advantage of choice, even if you're going to say, I always play what's best, as somebody that plays like mini war games and stuff, is even then that allows for you to play different versions of Warrior across an expansion or across multiple expansions, as opposed to in Final Fantasy, a lot of times, like, it can feel very stagnant when you're playing multiple tiers and it doesn't change in a meaningful way, especially as somebody that's not going to be pushing the hardest of the content. So the content can't do the heavy lifting. If your gameplay experience is part the content and part you and your character, and you guys together are making up the gameplay, when you are limited on what you can do as far as the content, I can't get into ultimates, or I don't have time for Savage, or whatever, the lack of variety on this end kind of just leaves the whole thing static. So I think there are a lot of builds that are available for the level of New World that I think Brian's playing. I think.
Material on my tank for a dungeon because kept dying. People always say crit is best, but in piety into better. What? What?
See? Don't. She's
what
thinking, don't do piety.
Build your own is more like fail your own. People try to force cookie cutter builds when cookie cutter builds aren't always necessary to clear the content. Okay.
In slot for your,
because piety
team,
doesn't do that.
There's always going
I
to be
assume
a
they
meta
meant the
in
other
all
yellow
these
one.
games. A lot of people argue that choice is delusional. but that usually is coupled with modern MMOs in which matchmaking really has a massive impact and a massive cost to the social infrastructure, to essentially the choice of players, and to the content that they get match made into. All of these things are what we're sacrificing for matchmaking, and I'm really proud that New World hasn't adopted that, because if it ever does, outside of like PvP matchmaking, but in terms of a PvE content, the content's going to have to suffer, your player choice is going to have to suffer, and the community will suffer, all for the sake of this level of convenience. Now, they brought in tools like a group finder. Final Fantasy XIV's party finder is by far the pinnacle here. So Final Fantasy XIV takes it and cakes the party finder, and I hope that New World continues to draw inspiration from Final Fantasy XIV's party finder, and it sounds like they are. That seems like the feedback that they've gotten.
They don't have a party finder, but they want to add the party finder to the game. Does New World have buns? No, it doesn't.
I think that's going to ultimately help things out, especially with cross-server play coming to New World. First with OP.
Choice is delusional if you don't want to hamper the other people in the party, absolutely. I mean, I think there are degrees of it. There's degrees of, like, choice that you can get away with without really...
I think a lot of the frustration that I've read from the top-end community around P8 and stuff is talked about when you talk about party comp and the 2-minute windows and stuff, is that there is less choice, even within 14. So, like, people can say there has been more choice in 14 than there is right now. So, like, yes, optimal, the true top end is the best, but, like, if the top 5% can all clear the content, most people are okay as long as you're in that kind of top 5% of builds. But the moment friction appears, we're going to start saying, okay, guys, let's drop to the top 4% and see if we do better. Oh, nope. We got to trim one more build. And they just keep trimming it out. So the question is, like, how many people can fit in that without it being just because we just lowered the bar so much that the whole top of the mountain fits in it. So within 14, there has been some frustration. You can go watch a clip of Xeno when he switched to Gunbreaker and see if he feels that see how he feels about choice now versus choice previously.
Causing any problems or hampering your ability to do your job well. It's something that World of Warcraft devs have been sort of wrestling with for years and years already, like trying to offer choices to players that won't immediately just be consumed by the meta, like some kind of choice that will feel like it offers a different options, different tools, different play styles without making it actively worse. They've been experimenting with that with varying levels of success, usually more success when they allow more freedom between those choices on the fly.
But then we'll hopefully see it continue to make its way into the game, which will help alleviate server issues and various different balance structures and power structures within. Now, the third thing ties all of this together. Social.
So I think the second one that he said, where he just likes the class system better and, playing around with builds, that's valid. That seems completely valid to me. That makes sense. That's a perfectly valid reason for why you might not want to play FF14. If you don't like being able to play around with talent trees and builds, then maybe this job system won't work for you because there's no way to do that at all. And there used to be a little bit of fiddling around you could do with materia. Now that's becoming less and less, where most jobs are going to be using crit materia, direct hit, and determination materia with not a whole lot of variance to like stack up speed, skill speed, and spell speed, with a couple of minor weird exceptions here and there. In general, most people are going to be using the same materia. So I feel like that is so far a valid criticism.
And the world is breathtaking. The game is a very social game, and this is in part because of player building and because of the player-driven economy, but it's also in the core game isn't pure instance simulator. Now, Final Fantasy XIV has an open world, and you participate in that open world maybe a few times, and then maybe you go and do a beast tribe or a tribal quest in one of the zones. But in New World, it's all integrated.
We are all struggling to say tribal quest instead of beast tribe.
Open world dungeons, and you have the instance.
And I do think that this is another valid criticism of FF14, is the open world. The open world, I feel like there could be more to make it feel more alive outside of hunt trains, fates, and gathering. Those are the main open world activities to keep people outside and doing stuff. After playing Guild Wars 2, though, I feel like there's never going to be a game that lives up to what Guild Wars 2 offers.
Guild Wars 2 open world is best in class. I know people are excited about their mount system, but I don't think their mount system works for all games. It's too pervasive. It spreads into everything it touches. And so like to make the mount system that immersive, everything else has to accommodate it. But the open world, just the mentality of just the way they plan events and the way they use old zones and the way they quest, and Guild Wars, bar none, like you could take Guild Wars mentality on open world and you could build the next 7.0. Still start with the story first, still plan on dungeons, trials, and raids, still plan on tribal quests. You could just take that mentality and like it is just bar none better. And you could do that to any other game. I do think if Guild Wars is that end of the spectrum, Final Fantasy is not the other end. There are things to do in that world, but the moment you're not capping tomes, the moment you're not doing hunts, the moment you don't care about gathering, especially things like unspoiled nodes, the moment you've already capped your tribal quests and you're done questing in the zone, it drops off. And so like I would say like it's not no open world. It's not no open world. But you know, it's definitely closer to that end of the spectrum. Guild Wars is the North Star. If you want good open world content, nobody's doing it better than Guild Wars. I do think New World fits further up that slider. And since you have to choose a game based on how's the combat system work, how's the crafting system work, what's the community like, what's the progression like, does it have a subscription, how much hours does it take to get in, all these different things, you can't always say, well, I'm just going to pick the thing that's best in every category. So if you want more open world content, New World is a better selection over Final Fantasy XIV. If you're like, the only thing I give a crap about is open world content, keep going. Keep going. Because I think New World is doing more with their open world now than Final Fantasy's doing with Endwalker, and New World's way newer. And one of the things newer MMOs really struggle with is to match the total content size of the existing games. Final Fantasy, if you're comparing the amount of instanced content, I want to get in and I want to try raiding. Final Fantasy, you could go back and do minimum item level and synced stuff of like everything. Go back and do coils. Go back and do Omega. Like, do ultimates. Like, New World's just not gonna compete. It doesn't matter if they have the single best dungeon ever made. Just through sheer quantity, they are just gonna be overwhelmed, right? This mighty Spartan warrior, but you've just got this horde of just coming in and just slaying you, because Final Fantasy's total quantity of instanced content is incredible. And the fact that there are really good instances in there, from everything from really narrative based all the way up to really mechanically based, means there is just something for anybody. So the fact that they are punching, in my opinion, above Final Fantasy open world says a lot about a game that's turning 1. A game that's, you know, like if it were a baby, is just now getting to the point that it can like stand up, right? It's just starting to take its first steps, maybe. Probably still have bumpers on the coffee table. It's just a baby game. And it's doing great. It's doing great.
An open world, like the open world is absolutely amazing in Guild Wars 2. It feels almost like the whole game is built around the open world as that being its heart and soul. Like all the exploration, all the progression that I've been doing so far has just been about exploring and wandering around. All the mounts are there to like play into this immersive sense of, oh, well, now I'm underwater, or now I'm out here going, and I need this type of mount for this type of terrain. That's fucking cool. So that's something Guild Wars 2 does extremely well. And now I have that new perspective after playing Guild Wars, that like, I feel like any other MMO or game that I play, the open world is going to seem like crap compared to
Expeditions.
That. Like,
I like that they have a balance between the two. And my personal fear and my feedback to the devs will always be, don't introduce a raid without introducing an open world raid. New World has an open world raid. In fact, you can do all these different things that...
Now, how is...
Who has that bird, man? That bird's impossible.
It's the open world in New World. You said New World's open world looks incredible, but without the content in it, that only gets you so far. So it looks really good, but what about like world bosses? Is there that kind of stuff?
Mm-hmm.
What do you say? New World? Yeah, look, I don't want to get off on a whole tangent about how fantastic Guild Wars 2 is, because I feel like I do that every single day. But Like, other games could definitely it wouldn't hurt to take a few pages from Guild Wars 2's books.
Oh, hands down.
Guild Wars.
Hands down. And Mr. Happy requested some of the things that we learned from the exploratory zones, right? When we think about things like Diadem and now Diadem, and we think of things like Eureka and Boston Zadnor, and what they were able to do with making the world feel just wow. And that's everything from the way they look to the way they're paced to the content that's in them. He talked about letting some of that bleed into the actual open world. Let that bleed into the actual open world. And Yoshi P just said that's not quite possible. But remember, he told Brian and I directly to our faces, the trust system's not going backwards compatible. Not gonna happen. It's impossible. I can try to explain to your tiny little pea brains. He said it very nice. I can try to explain to your tiny little pea brains, but you will not understand the complexity of what you're asking for. It's most impossible. And he was really nice about it, and he had all these reasons, but effectively, not going to happen. It will never happen. Well, here we are in October. Sports all the way through basically like Heavensward now. 6.3, it'll finish up Heavensward. By the end of this expansion, we will have 4-man support through all MSQ dungeons in the entire game, and they have talked about going back and adding the trials and maybe trying Crystal Tower. Like, it's so maybe we can take elements of Final Fantasy XIV, and it's a lot better when what you're requesting from a game and saying, oh, what I want them to get better at is I don't want them to come carbon copy something out of another game. I want you to take something you're already doing over here and learn from that over here. And I think it's a lot easier asked to, instead of saying what I originally said, go learn from Guild Wars 2, and instead say, what if Bosja Zadnor kind of leaked out onto the rest of the world?
The two's the books, and it looks like Blizzard team is already starting to do that. New World open world is super boring because most of it is forest, but the non-forest areas are nice. Okay.
The zones feel huge.
You can't swim.
You cannot swim, just like in Final Fantasy you couldn't. They are talking about adding swimming. They're talking about adding, I think, boats. They're talking about adding mounts. You run faster on roads. So, like, they're trying to navigate how they want to add the ability to transport yourself a little bit better, like in Realm Reborn. 1.0, I don't think you could jump. Something like that. Is that 11? Is that 1.0? One of those ones I didn't play. And so you like, it's on like a rock and you're stuck there. And so you can't, I got to run around. And so Final Fantasies continue to add to their movement. New World absolutely needs to continue driving down into that. 1.0 did not have chocobo mounts, no jumping, and then we had chocobo mounts and jumping, and then we added flying, and then we added swimming. So New World is they built a world that was fun to run through and be in. They had a teleport system that they experimented with a currency that was like Aetherites, but you had to pay this currency. But it was different than gold. It's called Azoth, but then they kind of neutered that out because they didn't like the way that felt. Kind of like Chocobo Porters, right? It just kind of just went away. And now there's this question of what the hell do I do with Azoth? So like New World is navigating transportation of its world. But when you are in its world, when you are in the place that you want to be in its world, it is beautiful and it feels awesome. And like Guild Wars, I find myself wanting to just explore it, and I'm like, I'm just gonna hang out here for an hour. And it's like, what are you doing right now? What are you achieving? I don't know, but I like it.
New World swimming. Let's see. Are we still not able to swim?
You cannot swim. You can like wade through rivers.
May 26th.
It's not like you're like you wade through rivers, so it's not like you're just stuck. You just can't get across lakes.
You can't? Okay. No swimming. All the water is shallow. You just walk through.
I don't think swimming really added that much to 14, by the way.
It
ends up being quite fun and engaging.
Gigging's fun.
But the UI really isn't there yet. So with a raid coming to New World, I think that's going to be something interesting to see how that...
Again...
Okay, I'm watching Zeppo right now. You're telling me that Lorenity just finished running the clock tower with her camera pointed backward?
I don't want to make this whole video about how great Guild Wars 2 is. Like, I don't want to just go on and on about that. But but underwater though. but you guys, look, underwater, they gave me a fucking spear gun and a trident and a spear and a pet shark. Okay, they gave me a spear gun.
The spear gun is the redeeming thing of swimming, and it wasn't like that. The original gigging method was, do you have a controller for your PC so that you have vibrate turned on simulator? That's it. Gigging sucked compared to the current spearfishing. So, and I have every single fish in spearfishing. I have them all. If I open up my Lawler achievements, and I come over here, I'm not a super good player, and yet when you hop down to fish, I freaking love underwater spearfishing. I love it. I have all of it. I adore this system. It's amazing. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. And swimming is just something I need to get there. If we're going to keep bringing up Guild Wars 2, Guild Wars 2 is the single best guild underwater combat system in any MMORPG I have ever heard of, I have ever seen, and I have ever played. I still hate it.
And a pet shark when I go underwater, dude.
Then also bleeds
Like-
into the core gameplay that happens in the open world.
So,
my feedback is usually
the spearfishing in 14, wonderful. Underwater in Guild Wars, it's the best of a terrible category. As Asmongold would say, or bring up, maybe, he'd be talking about the people rolling in this dog crap. It's the best of the dog crap.
always directed at
Now the bar has been raised to the point where I'm like, oh, swimming is not even the bar now. Like, swimming is that's like nothing. It's like the bare minimum. That's below the bare minimum. Like, not only do I now expect to be able to swim underwater in the open world, but I need to be able to have like a underwater mount, underwater pet, underwater abilities, underwater weapons.
the open world. That is a big aspect of Final Fantasy XI to me. And I hope that we can also draw inspiration from what made Final Fantasy XI great. I'd love to see Final Fantasy XI features brought into Final Fantasy XIV, but that's also one of those really big asks that really isn't practical unless they decided just to make a brand new MMORPG, and that's what I am hoping for.
How would you compare FF11's open world to FF14's open world? Like,
Dangerous.
what were the big draws for the
Dangerous.
FF11 open world for people here in the chat that have...
I've never played 11. I've watched a lot of 11. The number one thing that jumps out to me, the number one word for what Final Fantasy 11 is that is different than Final Fantasy 14 is dangerous. Now, it is dangerous to the point where a lot of people would go, yeah, and that's why I don't want to play it. New World is dangerous, but not to that point. When you're getting chased by a bear and you turn around and kill it, you're dying laughing. You're dying laughing. Oh my god, I almost got killed by a bear. Or maybe you did get killed by a bear. Why am I dying? And they won't even let me die to fall damage in Final Fantasy.
done it, that did play back in the day, or maybe still are playing FF11? Like, what has been your opinion? They're very similar. Don't all the new games coming out now have the benefit of
Similar.
hindsight?
You could lose
buddy?
experience. Similar. That person needs to zone out of Bozja.
Being able to pick and choose from WoW and FFXIV with the added benefit of updated graphics engines.
Similar.
Yes, more powerful overall PCs, etc.
There it is. Text edit. Text edit.
Expand
it
options.
It could actually kill you.
That the others might not code-wise be able to. Yeah, of course. I mean, any industry is good.
You could take your trusts with you because you had to be able to have people with you because it was not designed to be done by solo. It was designed to benefit group content. And then my understanding is within the class system, basically you had like a subclass, but then when you went into like dungeons, so imagine if like Summoner could bring along some of the Scholar abilities, but then when you went into a dungeon, you had to kind of like leave that behind and you need to focus in. You're in a group, stick to your job, stay in your lane. But when you're out in the world, it's so dangerous. Like, let's just start letting you mix and match is my understanding of the system.
Gonna build upon the shoulders of those who came before, of the people that the games and the people and the ideas that came before that were really good, that everybody liked, that shouldn't just be, forgotten. He said they're the same, really? I hated FF11 open world. After level 10, you have to be in the group or you're dead. 11 open world is pretty much Eureka. Yeah, that sounds about right. Need to be in a group or you're dead. Yeah, that was my experience. FF11 open world, a lot like Eureka. I mean, there is some charm to that. I did like in Eureka feeling like there were parts of the map that if I wander in there on accident, I'm going to be absolutely fucked. Like, I will be destroyed. I will be a little stain on the bottom of some giant elite's foot. FF11's open world from when I played is empty. The 11 open world draw it was that you sat in it for tens of hours grinding the same couple packs of mobs in each zone. Well, that is it's the classic MMO vibes. It's
definitely Eureka. You know what Eureka got me to do? Reinstall World of Warcraft so that I could do fishing in World of Warcraft, because that was the perfect thing to marry with waiting on the train to move. And then, because that is two incredibly boring things to do, Legion fishing raids and Eureka, I found that I had downtime, and so we had a third screen up, and the third screen had, I ran these like weird layouts like this, and the third screen was where I put Pokemon. Because a turn-based game was the perfect third priority. We'll move with the train. Once the train stays put, we'll fish, and once the fish line is in the water, before we have to catch it, let's grab a turn in Pokemon.
What people used to play for. The sense of danger was always present. I like the sense of danger. I do really like that, yeah. New fates in 14 Endwalker, really just tank, job solos, or Zerg. I like the sense of danger. Like, it reminds me leveling in Wrath of Lich King recently on a new character. I was leveling in Silverpine Forest, which is a low-level zone, but there are elites that wander around that will absolutely destroy you. Like, there's... just for shits and giggles, the devs decided to put a couple of elites in there that if you don't know where they are at all times, they will find you, they will hunt you down.
It's the world, right? It's the World of Warcraft. There's a troll in the area who is eating all the little sheep you're farming up for your quests. You're picking on these little sheep, and he comes in, and way back in the day, you'd have your headphones on, and there'd be this boom, 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 boom. And you're like, oh, I need to go.
And they will kill you before you can run away.
It's awesome.
And like, yeah, I died to those a couple of times, but I enjoyed that, actually. I think that's a nice thing to have in your game. Like, a lot of us remember from Burning Crusade.
And I cut across a field in New World, and it happened again. It is that same feeling. I stay on the road. The road is safe. The road ups your run speed, and the road doesn't have bears. And the road doesn't suddenly fill my entire screen with black smoke, and all of a sudden I'm fighting some nightmare. The world is safer. Stay on the road. Stay on the road.
The huge... I
love
forgot
it.
what they were actually called. You know, these giant robots that would patrol Outland, that if you run into one, you are going to get stomped real quick. Like, I think those are charming things that make you feel like, this zone has some life to it. Fell Reaver, the Fell Reaver, yeah. Like, I bet if I hear the sound effect of the approaching Fell Reaver, like, I would probably have an instinctive reaction to that.
It comes to the world of Final Fantasy Online. Whatever Yoshi P decides to do, I'm rooting for him. I think it's going to be a really interesting journey. Now, when it comes
here we
down
go.
to number 4...
Oh my god. Holy shit. Dude. Like,
no.
Hearing this noise
The
is
Reaver.
so upsetting for me.
The Reaver.
It's like, there's alarm bells going off in my head. Like, run.
I wanted to run.
Crafters are actually able to make best in slot. This plays into the player-driven economy.
It was like a 10-story monster that you're just like, I'm just going to quest on the other side of the zone for like 4 minutes because I decided to.
Plays into the content that you can then partake in, and it plays into the gold is power. This aspect alone allows you, the player, to choose how you want to progress down the road. Do you want to dive into the hardest content, or do you want to focus in on trying to make the economy work? This really does feel like a key pillar and aspect of MMOs that has gone missing for some time, where you think of like social, you think of hard content, you think of, you know, like open world content, you think of crafting and gathering. I, for the longest time, never could really understand why anybody would invest so much time into crafting and gathering in Final Fantasy XIV. Yes, you can make money, but
People
money
like it.
has a limit. And
I mean, the reason they do that is because they enjoy the system. I really think that most people that are leveling the crafting and gathering actually like the process of doing it in FF14, maybe more than in any other game where there's crafting and gathering. Like in a lot of other games, people really will just level it just because they heard it's a good way to make money. But if FF14, it's so involved, it's like its own job, its own armor sets, its own relics even. People get it.
So, New World crafting. So she understands Final Fantasy XIV crafting, which is effectively its own job with its own abilities, its own gear progression, its own side content, its own quests, its own narrative. It's got everything. At this point, it seems to operate in the zones independent because it's got like full speed stealth. Crafting inside crafting New World. So, crafting in New World is its own jobs. Much like Final Fantasy. And so you've got these craftings here. Let's check this out. Dun, 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 dun. And so we've got these crafters, and then we've got refiners, and so we've got these gatherers. And so you gather things so that you can, so you mine ore so that you can smelt the ore so that you can turn it into things. As you kind of level these up, you have the ability to use these to make various different portions of like your gear or consumables, things like that. The actual act of crafting tends to shift closer to that typical kind of auto-synth mentality that a lot of MMOs do. So it tends to be a little bit more about just getting into the system and getting used to it, that very discovery method. If we're going to keep bringing up Guild Wars 2, Guild Wars 2 is a wonderful experience getting to know the crafting, but once you get to know it, it's reasonably flat. And, you know, as opposed to something like World of Warcraft, where the act of getting the recipes is the only really interesting thing. They're looking to change that with Dragonflight. Best of luck. And so Final Fantasy is definitely the stronger crafting and gathering system, but I just wanted to kind of touch on what this is. It's very similar to Weapon Mastery, where you've got like a big overview system, and within those you have some minor little things that you need to learn. And how these interact with each other and how much of this gets consumed and how you manage inventory and how the market board works and stuff is really what, in addition to a crafting and gathering system, because you learn how the system works, and then the question is now, why would I do it? And that's something that's not answered by the crafting and gathering system, but is instead answered by how the rest of the game chooses to address the things that crafters and gatherers provide.
Invested in that because they like the rotation that you build and figuring out what's going to be ideal for this craft. There are people that are super into that. That's their main reason for even playing the game.
Sure.
You said he's leaving out some vital details that make the point fall apart. Like what? So what kind of details do you feel that he is leaving out here? So it comes down to he wants to be able to get Biss without having to raid to get it. Well, I also would like that. That sounds really good. Because I'm lazy. And I would
yeah, but it sounds good the same way that eating cookies and sitting on my couch tonight sounds good. I know deep inside that that will not be a long-term rewarding life for me. I can do it, and sometimes I do, but like, I've been in games when they started just distributing free loot like that, and I didn't like the end result.
I'd like to have the Biss just delivered to me by a Mogmail. One of the things I miss most is the elemental wheel and the importance of weather on the outdoor and even gear being...
It's why I don't personally see a reason to buy clears, because the act of the clear is the reward for me.
Augmented by weather. That's really cool. I like that. That sounds neat. It sounds immersive. I remember whenever we found out that we would be traveling to the moon for Endwalker, some people were asking Yoshi if there would be like survival systems on the moon where like, can you even breathe up there? The countless exploits and duping exploits that destroy the economy. Yeah, he did leave that out. That's true. Of course, the RMT will become more prevalent when you allow crafters and gatherers to make this. Can the crafters and gatherers make this in New World? This doesn't mean much in 14. You can clear the hardest content without even needing gear from the raid itself. Don't you need this to do Savage? Well, you probably don't need this to do Savage Criterion. I don't know, actually. I heard that it could be the case, but I don't know if that ended up actually being the case. Uranus, thanks for the 27-month resub. Why do you need BIS if you're not raising? You don't. It's just to feel good that you checked all your boxes, mostly. So yes, you're saying they could, but it's still gated now behind the hidden player watermark. Not big on the economy aspect because it always feels artificial because of people using stuff to their advantage. And some of it is not exactly dev improved.
Yes, there's catch-up gear, but it's never going to be on par. But then all the different counter arguments aside only just end up frustrating me because it all, in my mind, defeats the purpose. It misses the point. Who cares what you're like? Who cares how you go about to getting to the end goal? But that, I think, is something that bleeds in from World of Warcraft, and I don't think that's a good thing for the genre as a whole. I don't think I think WoW, for all that it's brought into the genre and all that it's pioneered, not all of it's great, and I don't think that's one aspect that's great. And I love that New World allows crafters to be able to compete on that stage. I like that materials that drives value and things like that. Could it be better? Absolutely. It always could be better. But all that being said, takes into number 5.
So we're here at 1140.
So craft BIS is the 4th point? Is that really what it distills down to?
I feel like I've missed
more sources of BIS even across casual play. Like if Relic was BIS, does that begin to satisfy that? If crafted gear was BIS, does that begin to satisfy that?
something here. Like, I feel like this is a part of this that I missed.
For him, I think it's going to be a really interesting journey. Now, when it comes down to number 4, crafters are actually able to make best in slot. This
okay, yeah, he said that's I think I missed this because I asked the question and he said yeah they can't.
Player-driven economy. This plays into the
okay. So nothing locked away based on your mechanical skill. It needs to be available from multiple sources. Mechanical skill can be a method, but it cannot be the exclusive method of receiving a reward.
Content that you can then partake in, and it plays into the gold is power.
But whenever they put
okay, I just want to understand his point.
To be purchasable.
He and I have talked about it. He and I have talked about that point long into the night, and you guys have heard that I very much disagree with him on it. So I just want to understand where he's coming from. If that's your goal, Final Fantasy XIV does indeed not do that. So if that is something you want from a game, that is a reason why Final Fantasy and 14 and New World are not the same game. And if you want that, that would be an area that New World would indeed beat Final Fantasy XIV. If that is your goal. It is not my goal.
In World of Warcraft. That ended up being really controversial because the people that were just using the WoW tokens with their real money to swipe and then go buy it from the auction house directly, the BIS item. So I feel like there's a good reason to make the best available gear from the most high effort content. I think that's the way that things should.
As a matter of fact, Dragonflight is stripping out some of the ways that BOEs were farmed in the past from Dragonflight. So like from Shadowlands, they are making a change for Dragonflight that will drastically change the way we, how many raid fights you're expected to do per week if you want to fill your vault, how many Mythic Plus per week you're going to do if you're Mythic Vault, how much PvP you're going to do if you just want to fill your Mythic Vault, how many World Quests you're going to do per week if you just want to cap that, and how many BOEs are coming out of raids. They are making a massive change to reduce what Brian is asking for. So World of Warcraft is getting further what he's asking for than closer.
Should be. It makes sense that the best gear should come from the most effort. That seems like a natural progression. I don't know how difficult this stuff is to craft, and I don't know how difficult it is to buy a New World, so it's possible that I'm comparing apples to oranges, but I don't know. FF14, he said, BIS gear sounds good, doesn't work. You think you want it, but you don't. What do you mean? BIS is good. It's nice to have BIS. RMT galore. It's a different game. Yeah, that's why I'm asking you guys. F14 is like that in general. You do stuff because it's fun. I mean, yeah.
You do 14 because it's fun? I haven't watched her response to Criterion, but I have a feeling when they release something that's only for the fun of it, sometimes feel a little differently.
Do stuff because it's fun, yeah, but I mean, there is a reward structure as well. I usually don't require a big reward to feel motivated to do something, like something really small. It doesn't have to be BIS all the time, though. Like, little rewards are usually fine. Isn't all BIS in New World crafted? Is all the BIS crafted? There is gear with special attributes and procs.
Guild Wars has crafting BIS availability. It's not something you can do in a day. It's time gated. There is also, Guild Wars has lots of options. I don't know how New Worlds works. World of Warcraft BIS is not only not crafted, but is getting further and further from it. And Final Fantasy, it's definitely not, just objectively not. At the beginning of a tier, when it's the best thing available, sure, there are these brief moments, but across the majority of days within an expansion, the people in the game who are capable of putting out the best numbers, the pieces that are doing the heavy lifting the objective is to get away from crafted gear. That is the objective. You're only in crafted gear because the other gear is loot locked. The goal would always be to replace the crafted gear, with rare exception, which is usually because of stat priorities. And so I think there's like a healer accessory right now that stays in place for a long time. So like what he's calling for does happen a little bit in 14, but he wants to be able to source BIS entirely from crafted, and that's just not going to happen in 14. 1 or 2 slots is not what he's looking for. He wants to replace all 10 pieces or whatever it is with crafted gear, and through the purpose of crafting and through the purpose of the market board, be able to acquire all of the loot he needs without clearing any raids if he chooses. So 1 or 2 pieces isn't going to satisfy him. It's not about a compromise. It's, I want sources that are not clearing Savage, Ultimate, Criterion Savage to be sources of BIS. And that could be crafting. I think he would be fine if it was hunt currency. I think he would be fine if tome gear was BIS. I think he just wants more sources of being able to hit the highest number, like people who clear the highest content do.
That are dungeon only in New World. New World crafting is not easy. Okay.
New World crafting gets expensive. Like, compared to 14, in my opinion, it feels expensive. And it's not that things don't cost a lot in 14, but I feel like I can avoid them. I'm pretty new in New World, and it already feels like, how the hell? So examples would be things like astronomy components to your flasks. Examples would be like extreme drops that go into weapons, but it feels like I run into elements like that a lot more often.
So you're saying that crafting it is nightmare difficulty. The highest level of content should give you glamour, and the achievable highest level of content for the other 99% of players should be BIS.
Just to be clear, from Brian's perspective, the glamour that is locked behind this content is also something that should be available. There should not be unique glamours locked behind Ultimate. That is Brian's opinion. Just to be like really clear how far he's taking this statement. It's not just, I think it'd be cool if crafters had some crazy method of getting BIS, because that's something that Mr. Happy in his response to Sphia kind of talked about. What if crafters had a way to maybe across an expansion slowly upgrade it more than once? You know, maybe we explore that. No. All things need to be available from multiple sources at all times. He would like it if in the open world or in some piece of content there was a rare chance to get a drop from the Mog Station. He wants all things available for all players if they have unlimited amounts of time. If they have unlimited amounts of time and skill, their method of play should be able to reward them through some form or fashion with all of their extrinsic reward goals. Nothing should be truly locked or sealed away in anything. So if you are willing to PvP long enough, you can get things from PvP to trade your way and barter your paperclip into a house. Like, you should be able, all of that. And then there was a question earlier, does he do Savage? He did E9 and 10. We were going to take him through P5 before he had the tooth thing and had to go to the emergency room.
If you aren't doing the
So if this is your goal, you can see why New World would be a better fit. Once again, like, I'm saying Final Fantasy is the better fit for me. He's saying New World's the better fit for him. You can see why.
hardest content, do you really need BIS? No, you don't. But it makes sense that a player on an
That's
RPG
fair.
progression timeline wants to see the numbers on their gear go up. Like, they want to see the item level get the best it can be so they can feel a sense of like satisfaction and completion.
I think it's fair.
In FF, once you have BIS, all you do is complain about what it lacks until the next BIS pieces are available. Rinse and repeat. I mean, true, yeah.
Aspect of MMOs that has gone missing for some time, where you think of like social, you think of hard content, you think of, you know, like open world content, you think of crafting and gathering. I, for the longest time, never could really understand why anybody would invest so much time into crafting and gathering.
So you heard that
in
part
Final Fantasy
already.
14.
You
Yes,
heard that
can make
already.
money, but money has a limit. And yes, there's catch-up gear, but
I
it's
needed to
never
hear
going to
it.
be on par. But then the, you know, all the different counter arguments aside only just end up frustrating me because it all, in my mind, defeats the purpose. It misses
God, I think he'd like Guild Wars 2 if he was able to spend more time with it. I mean, he does like it, and he has spent time with it, but my God, everything he described sounds like Guild Wars 2 is just such a good freaking fit.
This is the point. Who cares what you're like? Who cares how you go about to getting to the end goal? But that, I think, is something that bleeds.
Everything you do in Guild Wars gives some form of experience, and yet it's all post-progression experience, which he calls for all the time. There's a million sources of gear, but gear doesn't really matter. There's build variety, and every class and build can kind of clear every content, but you don't have to. The story is there only when you want it. It's all fully voice acted, so all the things he's saying, New World has this, and it's getting these things, but Guild Wars already has those things. Some of those things you're calling for New World and saying one day maybe it'll have this. Guild Wars got in like 2012.
It's in from World of Warcraft, and I don't think that's a good thing for the genre as a whole. I don't think I think WoW, for all that it's brought into the genre and all that it's, you know, pioneered, not all of it's great, and I don't think that's one aspect that's great. I love that New World allows crafters to be able to compete on that stage. I like that materials or that drives value and things like that. Could it be better? Absolutely. It always could be better. But all that being said,
So, I mean, people in the chat are saying that in New World, crafting the BIS is not easy at all. That it's very difficult. So, I mean, if that is
In 14, crafting BIS was not hard at all. I crafted my 610 week 1, bought my materia because I didn't stockpile it because I'm an idiot. I've crafted my own crafter BIS. I've crafted gathering BIS before, though I'm not currently gatherer BIS. There is nothing hard about it. I'm not saying it is not work. I'm not saying it doesn't cause skill. It's one of the handful of times when I'm like, gill's nice. But it is not hard. I pull up macros that make all of you that come hang out on stream go, what the hell is that? And I go, I built it myself. Are you proud, mommy? Can you hang it on the fridge? I drew it. And you go, what is it? It's a pony. And that's my crafting macro. And you know what? High quality. High quality. Now, we did have some times where it wasn't 100% chance at high quality. But this tier in particular, let's not worry about the past. This tier in particular, every single time I had less than 100% chance at high quality, it worked out. So in my experience, 68 to 78% of the time, it works all the time.
the case, then maybe it could be
Pentamelting, however, ranged from, oh my god, I can't believe that was only 1 or 2 materia, to where did that entire stack go, though?
like another progression pathway that makes sense. But also being able to just buy it off of the buy it straight from other players, I still don't really think that makes a lot of sense to me. If you don't even, well,
Takes
let me
into
just,
number
let's
5.
hear him out.
The balance between the instance and the open world content. I talked about this already throughout this entire thing, but to be able to run around this world that is breathtaking and it's engaging and
If I don't put the effort in, why expect the reward? Yeah.
it's dangerous, and at the same time, it also still allows you to have a solo level of play. Being able to see people out in the open world, never really feeling alone, even if you're feeling a little bit isolated or you're trying to escape from the busyness of the various different cities and city life within the game, it does feel connected. You see chat going off. You can mute chat if you want, if you don't want to be a part of that, but you can see that conversation going on, and it's truly, truly breathtaking to see. Sometimes funny, and
I'm bummed he wasn't able to have the time to finish Eureka, because I feel like that's a lot of what he's calling for within 14.
you end up having these cultures and these people that you see over and over again that you start to actually build relationships with and bonds with, that they're all going and trying to farm up different things. You end up
Do we need a global chat in Final Fantasy? No, we don't. I'm thinking about Novice Network right now and what a cesspool it is.
teaming up more naturally than ever before. And the instance content, I think, in this game is some of the best instance content. The expeditions are so powerful and so interesting, and they absolutely smash 14 in this regards, because 14 has the philosophy that the goal is to win, and everything's really structured around that victory. And in New World, it's not guaranteed. There's no guarantee that you will win and clear the expedition, but you're still actually rewarded completely along the way. So it never feels like you wasted your time, and it also doesn't necessarily.
If you compare this to everything prior to Criterion, every dungeon in Final Fantasy XIV is designed to die within the lockout. It is hard to picture a situation where 4 people legitimately cannot clear a dungeon. Oh, but Chris, what about Aramvale? No. Every single dungeon in Final Fantasy XIV is designed to die. So because he has not gotten to spend a lot of time in Extremes and Savages on patch, because he has not gotten to spend a lot of time in Ultimates, it's not about why he hasn't, the fact that he hasn't, there is very little content in Final Fantasy XIV that's not designed to die. And Yoshi P has even said he doesn't want to make Savage so hard that if somebody who's trying and putting the effort can't clear it. So the goal is never to lock something away. So if he feels that the New World devs are designing content and going, I don't know if you can beat this, and then saying, okay, but how are we going to put a reward structure in place so that a partial clear is also valuable, because clears are not a promise, I can understand what he's saying here.
Necessarily guarantee that you're gonna win, and
But I don't know how New World works on that stuff.
gone in multiple times.
So is an expedition like a trial fight? Is this like a big boss fight? Or is this more like a hunt boss? First 20 levels in New World were enjoyable. I hit max and it was just the same for everything at the time.
That's actually one of the things Brian likes as well about New World. That the end game, in his opinion, starts from the very beginning. And not that you're doing the hardest things at the beginning, but that there is no, like, let me race to the good part. That as soon as you're in, if you like it at level 5, that's just going to continue. As opposed to sometimes in other MMOs, it feels like, oh, this is kind of dragging on. Don't worry, it gets better.
Expeditions are their dungeons. So he's saying that there's not a guarantee that you'll be able to clear the expedition. But if you don't, you're still going to get a reward for it. I feel like a little... I don't know. I feel a little bit torn about it. Because on the one hand, I'm like, maybe the dungeons in FF14 are too easy. Too much of a snooze fest. But then again, I hear posts every single day from people complaining about what a hard time they had in the dungeon with the random people.
I've just never not gotten it clear. When the new Puerta Decumanum or whatever dropped, the new trial on the MSQ roulette, we had 10 minutes left on the lockout because we had a tank that didn't have any idea how to like turn on their stance or anything, and we had a healer that had no ability to both heal and not get hit by avoidable mechanics. And they were both new, and it was both their first time. And we got through it. We did. We got through it. The other DPS and I, we just danger Dorito'd ourselves. Stay with me, stay with me, stay with me. We used all of our... We got through it, but my God, it was hard. But honestly, the vast majority of times, like, I have had a healer leave the dungeon, and as a warrior, I just finished Troya. When the DPS are like, don't pull the boss, the healer's not back, I'm not going in there with you. Okay. I'm still gonna pull the last boss of Troya, because I was here to get it clear, and I'm just gonna do that.
So, like, it seems people struggle an awful lot with the difficulty that the dungeons are at in Final Fantasy XIV right now. Even though I do not think that, like, I don't know how people are failing in them.
Yep.
I don't. In fact, just today, somebody was saying that, you know, healing.
I thought he would like Vanilla WoW. He tried it. It just didn't. And he's like, oh man, this is really amazing. And then it just kind of, I don't know, like that person in high school or college or whatever you went on dates with, and you were like, I saw him across the room. I was attracted to him. I went up. Their personality was amazing. We got along really well, and we went out on a date, and they're really into me, and I'm just not feeling it. Like, it just felt like he was so complimentary of World of Warcraft Classic, and then just, are you gonna play it? Oh yeah, I'll call. Yeah, but are you gonna call tomorrow? Yeah, I'll call. Is it me? No, it was amazing. I love it. I can't stop telling people how wonderful you are. But you didn't call.
I think Stone Vigil hard was a lot harder than healing an expert roulette at max level. Like, the expert doesn't really feel expert. I feel like that's valid. I do feel like that is valid. At least an expert roulette should feel maybe a little bit
expert,
a little bit more
expert
challenging than it is.
I named Troya because it's the highest level dungeon in the game, and it's just easy. The most fun I've had in Troya is when we manual queued without a healer.
You think a reward for failure? Not okay. You don't have many skills. It's just that you don't have enough skills. Sounds more and more like he wants Vanilla WoW. I don't know. Has he played Vanilla WoW? This point makes no sense. There's never a guarantee to win any content in FFXIV either. This goes for any game. Most games have some level of reward, even if you don't win. Is there anything in FFXIV that you could not win?
You could prog Ultimate. You could prog DSR for 100 hours and get nothing.
Yeah. Have you done Mentor Roulette? Have you played Mentor Roulette? There's like, if you want a dungeon where there's no.
Is there anything that you've done in 14 where you could do it with all of your effort and not win? Have you tried Mentor? Oh God, that's funny.
Guarantee.
Oh.
That you're gonna make it out. Just queue into the Mentor Roulette because the odds are very good that you will fail. Very good.
Times on the expeditions I've cleared easily before, but we're taking new players through. Maybe they're not at the right power level. It doesn't restrict us in that regards. It allows us the freedom to fail. And I think that's really a critical aspect to the success of New World. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm attracted to it as a gameplay design.
I don't know why he hasn't tried solo clears of Palace of the Dead or Heaven on High.
Now, I did not list this PvP. I did not talk about PvP in this video until this point for a reason. Is I think Final Fantasy XIV's PvP, especially with Crystalline Conflict, is incredible. It's truly some of the best work that I think Yoshi P and his team has done in the game to date. I think New World definitely needs to keep investing in that. And I've given feedback regarding open world PvP, incentives for that, kind of a hot zone or something like that that would rotate each every week. Those are just some examples. And the PvP that they have in New World, I actually really enjoy the PvP in New World. And so for this one, it doesn't do it better, it doesn't do it worse. Like, it's going to be all about your matter of preference in terms of that. And I think
so. With the BIS argument, I know we're going back a little bit, but on the BIS thing, he said that it's good that the crafters can craft the BIS for people to buy. Is that what he's doing? Like, is that what he wants to do? Like, what would he want to do ideally for getting BIS? Like, does he want to?
He wants to pay a crafter and maybe craft one or two pieces himself, but mostly pay a crafter. And he wants all the other things he does, a little bit of gathering. Yeah, I got some dungeon drops over here to be what pays for that. I played a hodgepodge of content because it's what I wanted to do. Every time I log in, I did everything I wanted, and at the end, I got the reward I wanted. And so BIS, swap BIS out for anything. There's a super cool new mount. There's a certain super cool glamour. The best in anything. Any one thing. Anything from BIS. I love the way Bo Burnham does that. Any one thing. Can any one thing be acquired from doing everything? I'm just over here just playing the game my way, and then I'm going to take all my progress, I'm going to put it in a sack, and I'm going to hand it to you, and then you're going to give me the thing I wanted. Off the Mog Station, from Ultimate, from Savage, from Criterion Savage, whatever. We're going to put a number on everything, and I'm going to put a number on my crap. And if I play optimally, maybe my bag is full of 5 hours of stuff. And if I play terribly, maybe my bag's full of 200 hours of stuff. Now, to some people, as I describe Final Fantasy XIV, they say, but why would you want that? And to those of you in chat that are saying, I play Guild Wars 2, you're like, I know. I already have that. It exists within Guild Wars 2. And there are things that are gated. But there's an awful lot of rewards that you can just take from over here and you can just exchange for a pile of someone else's crap.
Raid for that? Does he want to craft? I think he doesn't want to craft for it. That's something that I think I missed here.
But we're only comparing 14 to New World, right? So it doesn't matter that Guild Wars, I think, is actually scoring really high on the scoreboard. I think Guild Wars is sitting there watching these two teams play, and they're just like, but we could beat both of these teams!
What is his preferred play style in that regard towards the player power progression for his character? I feel like I didn't get that.
This is the scorecard for grading Guild Wars.
Does he want to be the maker or the buyer? Sounded like he wanted to be able to.
He doesn't want the gates that are in Guild Wars, though. So to be honest, even in Guild Wars, he'd say, I love what you're doing. Can my sky scale be purchasable every single step? Can every single legendary be purchasable? Every single one? Can all versions of Ascended be purchasable? How do I buy a War Claw? So there are things within Guild Wars I think he would still find gating. But it's close. It's close. It's close. And that full voice acted story and all those other things that he's been scoring New World off of, it's all there. It's all there. Guild Wars 2 is like EVE Online if you just landed on a planet and developed actual story. I'm loving it.
Grind and buy it. Oh, so just like because he really liked FF11, just wanting to be able to spend more time.
Okay, so the question is, what's the point of playing a game if you can just buy it? So the idea is that I can take whatever gameplay element I want and whatever reward I want, and you could say, Chris, the gameplay I like is iPhone, and the reward I want is B12 gummies. Well, unfortunately, iPhones result in charging cables that aren't useful with any other device. Oh. Well, do those have value? Kinda. Can I trade those to you for B12 gummies? Yeah. Yeah. And then he says, I'm tired of iPhoning. I want to Lulu mug it up today. How much Lulu mugging do I have to do? Well, what do you want? Well, I still want the B12 gummies.
I'm grinding to get a BIS. Yeah? I mean...
So he's not looking to go swipey. I just want to buy cheat code. He wants to play video games. He just wants to assign his time towards whatever reward he can get, is my understanding.
Like a relic, because FF14, like the closest thing that we would have to what I think he's describing would be the relic journey, where you need to grind out a shitload of materials for your relic weapon over the course of an expansion. Now,
and Shadowbringers was the most diverse relic weapon grind we ever did, and it was the first weapon relic that he ever finished, and he talked positively about it the entire way through.
We just have our first step right now in the game, so it's not all there yet. It will only be there at the end of the expansion. But at the end of the expansion, it will be Abyss weapon that you grinded for. So is this like that, but for every piece of armor that you can wear, not just the weapon in New World?
Final Fantasy XIV definitely with Crystalline Conflict wins that mode, and if they ever brought some...
I also would like to hear, what is attractive about this for him? That's another question that pops in my head. So if you don't want to craft it, and you don't want to raid for it, which I'm not sure. If he
Number go bigger. The same reason he likes leveling jobs. I have played games with Brian's for years. He likes filling bars. Make number go bigger. He does not like that the level caps and then it doesn't go anywhere. He wants there to be a system after you reach level cap. Like freaking Guild Wars.
Does just want to grind for it to get the best, then what? Why? Like, what do you want to use it for?
I didn't realize that would be my response to this. I feel like her. Can we just make this whole video about Guild Wars?
Is it just because like having the best feels the best? Because I know a lot of people that do feel that way. But, like having the highest item level, like that just feels like the best to you. Like you feel like a sense of completion from doing that. I think that's another thing that I would like to know, to have clarified.
Like that into in New World, I think that'd be a real big win. That'd be really exciting to see. But New World does have some things that I think, especially in open world, that I wish Final Fantasy would do. So it's a really kind of a split point between the two. And PvP is obviously a hot topic because some people don't even want it. Some people think New World's an always PvP open game, and that's not how it is at all. So I know that there's some misconceptions, and also people think about dueling as open world PvP, and there's misconceptions around there. So it gets to be a tricky topic in any community that you talk about it, because there are people who have really hot opinions about this, whether it's an easy yes or a hard no, one way or the other. It's going to be what it is. Now, that's what I want to sit down and talk to you guys today about in terms of New World and why I think that it is doing a much better job than Final Fantasy XIV is doing. There's a lot of, things that we didn't talk about, and we could talk about those in later videos if you guys are so inclined, but I'm not here to waste your time and fill your feed with things that you're not interested in.